Hi, thanks. It's exciting to be back here after I was here last year and we were talking a lot about blended learning and personalized learning, and now we're talking about it again and in a very sort of a different way. Coddy Johnson came to the current work he's doing now after running a program that I would never let my teenagers use called Call of Duty. Many of you are familiar with that. So he's gone from that to running this whole new program here in AltSchool, which is something I'm not sure you folks have heard of. So we're going to kind of take you inside an AltSchool classroom first by showing you how the students spend their day. And what's also very cool is that Coddy's 6-year-old daughter attends an AltSchool. So we're going to hear a little bit about that as well. Let's start by looking at some of the slides so we can talk about how they start their day with something called playlist and portrait.
Sure, thanks. Thanks for having me. Before we leap into the slides, the fundamental problem we're trying to address is to help teachers and students understand where a student is in their learning, not just academically, but also social emotionally, and to represent that together, and then have the ability to work in an ongoing way in partnership that provides the student ownership in that experience. So the first thing you see up is the playlist. When a student comes in each day, the first thing they do in the first hour is they pick up their playlist. This is a series of activities, initiatives, and projects that teacher and student have come up with together that are helping them move forward in their learning curve. That informs what you'll see next, which is the next slide, which is portrait. And portrait is just the capture of the ongoing assessments that teacher and student are doing together across a series of standards. And the way we've built this platform that teacher and student share together is it can incorporate Common Core standards, or Montessori, or even Reggio. Some of our partner schools are doing that. And what we're doing is working with lab schools that we run and own, there's 8 of them, to build this tool set for teacher and student together. And those tools that enable student ownership and learning together between teacher and student, we're providing to partner schools. And as you click through what that portrait looks like, these are the assessments teacher and student do together, and third-party assessments. You can kind of go deeper and deeper against layers so that the student has an understanding and the teacher has an understanding of where they are in the progress against a set of standards. For us, importantly, those standards are not just academic. They are the non-cognitive set of competencies like patience, grit, curiosity, collaboration that are just as important and present in the learning experience as academic standards.
That's a lot to start out with. So let's back up a little bit. What is AltSchool? How many AltSchools are there, and why do we need AltSchools? Alt, I'm assuming, standing for alternatives.
Sure, there's 8 of them that exist right now. We have 4 partner schools we'll start working with this fall. The leader of one is here today, Garrett. Hi, Garrett. Garrett runs Berthold Academy in Reston, Virginia. And stepping all the way back, it does feel that we're at a moment where the preponderance of research would say that if you can provide an experience for the student that is personalized, meaning you know where they are in their learning, that's whole child, meaning it's looking at both academic and social emotional progress, and it has ownership for the student. They have a voice in how they undertake their learning, that not only are academic outcomes accelerated, but life outcomes are accelerated. That's hard to do. That is really hard to do.
Well, tell us what that looks like for a 6-year-old. Yours, for example.
Sure. So Savannah is 6, and Savannah is at the Palo Alto Alt School. And she started this year. She's in kindergarten. And her job at 6 years old is just to take photos of her work with an iPad. That's all she does. And in fact, her screen time is only about 3% of the day. It's all offline learning at that age for her. But in her first 2 months, she's taking pictures of her work, and she and her teacher step back and they look at the work together, and they realize that she has taken hundreds of pictures of rainbows and castles. And it's just like cranking out rainbows and castles at like a remarkable rate. And it's a moment to reflect for Jen, her teacher, and Savannah about why this is. And in the dialogue, what ensues is that Savannah is scared to try new things. She's nervous about that. And one of the competencies that they're talking about is resiliency, the willingness to try even when things are hard. So she and Jen write a goal together, that Savannah will keep trying even when things are tricky. And now she has this in her mind as a learner. She has that kind of ownership. And, we're building this, and I'm hoping it might work. But it came real for me about 2 months ago on a playground. Savannah is climbing a climbing wall here. I have a 3-year-old was just kind of a mess and in like mud. And so I'm watching the 3-year-old make a mess. And I hear Savannah on this climbing wall say, "Dad, this is so easy." And I'm like, "That's nice." And then she says, "Dad, I'm going to make it harder. I'm only going to use the yellow pegs." And she's not a physically aggressive girl. And I look over and she's trying this really hard thing. And I was like, this is happening. She has this now metacognition and understanding of who she is as a learner, and she's pushing herself to try things that are hard. That's why we're building this surface area for teacher and student, to create that possibility in the learning environment.
So are you arguing that by attending AltSchool and learning about going beyond rainbows and castles, she is doing a lot better than she would be, say, attending your regular public school?
I think what I'm saying is that the ability for a learner to understand who they are as a learner is the most fundamental accelerant that can take place, not only just in academic environments, but in life environments. And I think research is fairly supportive of that. We're trying to build, to do that, it's not like you just build a light app and like throw it out to the world and you're like, "Hey, does this work?" We feel like we need to go through a period of deep R&D in our own schools, and then with a hand-selected group of partner schools, to really show how you build tools to help teacher and student do that, where the student can get that sense of ownership of their learning.
And in traditional education, do you feel like there's no opportunity for that?
No, I think there's some districts that are doing a remarkable job of this. We talked about some backstage. Lindsay Public School District in California is one. In Vista Public School District in Southern California, they're doing remarkable things around student ownership. When you speak with those districts, what they would say is, for the most part, this would have been a lot easier if there was a tool set out there to help us, and we are trying to build that tool set.
The difference is, though, you're actually charging tuition for these schools. How much does it cost to go to an alt school right now?
It's somewhere between 25 to 27K. Our goal for those schools, they lose money, to be clear. They are not schools meant to drive profit. They are an R&D and project with parents and teachers and students to make this possible. There's only 8 of them. There'll only ever be 8 of them. It is to be able to build a platform that we bring to partner schools.
How will you know that it works? What kind of evidence are you building? What kind of data are you collecting? How are you going to show us that these ideas really are workable?
Yeah, that's the difficulty with a system like this, right? It can be very insular, and you worry that well, that's great that you have these 8 lab schools that are making this progress, but what does that say to the world? So we think about at least 5 external benchmarks. Academic performance, and we benchmark ourselves against an external test called Measures of Academic Progress, which is kind of one of the best at trying to get at just sort of analytical thinking and not just rote memorization. We think about social emotional progress, and we benchmark against a test called Mission Skills Assessment. We think about engagement for students, which matters fundamentally, and we use Gallup for that. And then we do teacher and student surveys, teacher and parent surveys on their own engagement. So those are the 5 things to say with us and with our partner schools. It's not just this insular world we're building. You can benchmark against external norms and still know that kids are making progress.
So what are your plans to sort of roll this out to other schools and expose public school systems to these ideas in ways that might be useful to what you're learning, incorporating that?
Yeah.
Because you have only 8 schools right now.
8 schools and then 4 partner schools that start this fall. I would say first, we have a contrarian bet in the space. We feel like most education technology has taken the scale first route. They built an app, they've tried to scale it to as many places as possible and then build value. And there's a lot of logic to that. This is the story of Facebook and Google and Uber and Snapchat. Build a thing, get a lot of people using it, and then we'll add value over time. We're taking the opposite approach. We are building value first. This is more like...
Wait a minute, what does that mean to build value?
One moment. An analogy might be like this. This is much more familiar with like making something in the medical space. You and I would never come up with a heart pressure medication, give it to 10 million people and be like, "Did it work? How's your heart? What's happening?" We would go into lab first and really test, first no harm and then improving outcomes. And then from that lab environment, once it's working, then try to scale it. And so for us, our rollout strategy is to start with a select number of schools that at first look like us, that are independent schools committed to this approach to learning. Year 2, so this is now in the fall of 2018, we hope to go to our first charter schools. Again, not for scale, purely for partnership about how we build this tool set in collaboration. And then year 3, 2019, 2020, our first public districts. Again, not for scale. We will not be trying to throw it out to every public district. We'll work with those that really care deeply about student-led learning and building a tool set that can help them. And then once we do that, we hope we'll be able to show transforming outcomes and scale it more broadly from there.
Fair enough, but we have to be clear that there is a profit motivation here. And rather than what I'm going to do is take an example I read in one of the many stories I've read about AltSchool, where there was a man who was touring one of the schools, and he decided against enrolling his 10-year-old because he said he was uncomfortable about the intersection of kids and Silicon Valley. And he said that the people who are investing want to see a return on their investment, and I'm pretty uncomfortable on lots of levels with kids being the widgets of a venture capital firm.
Yeah.
So he brought up some concerns, and he said he was also uncomfortable with making another quote-unquote walled garden in our society, where kids of the parents with the monies to do it send them off to an environment that's rarefied and gives them all sorts of benefits. So that is sort of a tension inherent in any kind of school that's opening with a profit motivation, despite the great ideas that you're talking about.
Totally. No, I hear that concern and that criticism. And I think we're especially prone to it because, we did start in Silicon Valley, and there can be this like, hey, is Silicon Valley coming to like figure this out? It's, and there's, we're really.
Skepticism.
Yeah, totally. And we're trying to have a real humility about this approach. So I would take one step back, and then we can leap into that specific point. But in education today, broadly speaking, 99% of the dollars, 99.3% of the dollars, go to end providers and beneficiaries. Only about 0.7 go into something scalable. Let me make that tangible. Think about the internet that we use today. All of us pay $30 to $40 a month for internet, but trillions of dollars have gone into building out that internet to make it something we can all use. What we're trying to show is that there's a way that there can be a scalable way to continue to invest in a platform that is benefiting a number of schools at once. That's what we're trying to build. That circle where, hey, there's investment into the platform gets better, and it helps students to accelerate. That's the core of our model.
How do you see it solving the equity problem that's so inherent in our education system in this country?
Yeah,
and the achievement gap.
Totally, and it's the biggest knock against us, and it's a fair one at present, which is this is an incredibly important issue. And when are you going to be helping those students in the most struggling districts? If you go back to the approach we're taking, which is we don't think it's scale first, it's value first. We feel like the increasing series of environments that we go into, that's our goals in year 3, 4, 5 to be in those environments. We feel like going in now, we're not prepared. To take the medical analogy again, if you came up with something that could be really helpful with heart medication, the first place you would deploy it would not be on the front lines of an overseas war. You would take it to environments that are more controlled, and then you would move to those places. That our goal is to be with every kid, and I would say even more broadly, if you build a platform that the more students you add to it, the better it gets, because now you have more students and more information coming in. You can get to a place where the best education is the most accessible one. That's our mission. That's what we're trying to build.
Great. I'd like to give the audience a chance to ask some more questions, but I first want to make sure that we have fully explained what personalized learning is. I'm hearing about it more and more. I just visited a bunch of schools in Vermont that are using it. A lot of foundations are funding it and talking about it. Can you explain what it is?
Sure. I don't know that I can speak for the industry. I can speak for our understanding of it, which is we feel like personalized learning is understanding where the student is against a series of standards and having a deep understanding of that. So here's what they've mastered, here's what they've not mastered. And for us, it really does mean both academic and social emotional. That picture that student and teacher share is the basis to allow an experience that then is meeting the student for where they need to go next to help them through the next series of standards.
That's great. I think we have a question right over here. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Anna Greenstone, and I'm with Reading Partners. I wanted to know if you can speak a little to one or two things about the platform that you think are really dynamic in terms of engaging the student, because the story you told about your daughter, what I heard that was really engaging was the interaction with her teacher, and her teacher pushing her to have that metacognition. So can you tell me one sort of unique thing that you see in the platform that does that?
Sure. Well, I would also say, just to pick up with Savannah, as I said, the most that she'll spend on screen is about 3% of her time. By middle school, the most someone will spend on a screen in our schools is typically 25% of their time. So this isn't a screen learning environment. We feel like the teacher is fundamental to the experience, that human connection is critical. So I don't think there's ever a world that we believe in that replaces the teacher with a platform. The teacher is there, but the platform is servicing teacher and student in their shared goals. There are cool things that can happen once you have a platform representing that experience. For instance, just capturing inline assessment from teachers, that progress between Savannah and her student. Imagine now you're in 3rd or 4th grade where it's more academic versus just pictures being drawn. We're able to take that data from just inline assessment and make a prediction about the MAP score of a student that is has a narrower confidence range. In other words, we're more confident about that than the MAP score itself. So they wouldn't have to take the MAP score. Like, just from the inline assessment, they don't have to take the MAP test. So you now have the ability to, like, this is not why we're building it, but you could. Why would we do this invasive testing? You already understand where the student is as part of the dialogue happening between teacher and student. You don't need to insert invasive testing to constantly figure that out. Those are the kinds of things the platform can do.
We have a question here, but just speaking about teaching real quick while we're getting to that, I'd love it if you could just tell us a little bit about what the ratio of teachers to students are in the school you have there is, because we're trying to picture it.
Yeah, sure. It's about 11 to 1 now. We'll actually be adding teachers and resources in our own schools because there's a co-development process taking place. When we're doing this work, we have educators, engineers, product designers, central pedagogy leaders together working through this, and that is a process that requires that working team to go build this. So our goal right now is not to like recreate the 20 to 1 environment, it's to build these tools and build them deeply.
Got it. Do we have time for the last question here?
Hi, I'm Andrew Blickel. I'm at Life Pieces to Masterpieces. And my question is, it seems like you've put a lot of thought into the benchmarks and making sure what works for the students you have now will continue to work for a wider range of students. If in 2019, 2020, you go into the public schools and you find that what worked in your lab schools does not work for these populations, where do you go from there and keep the investors happy and make sure that you're actually doing what's best for all students?
Yeah, that's why, again, I mean, the goal in 1920 is not scale. The express purpose will be to work with a very small number of public school partners where I'm confident all that we've built will not be right in that environment. And it's to then collaborate with them deeply, be like, well, how do we change this and shape it with the 50 engineers that we have and the education team so far to make it right for the environment? I don't think there's a world where 2019 we feel like we're in that environment. It's like, oh, it's working perfectly. It's the next 3 years are about that deep development with partners, and we've laid that out in our plan. And our investors are patient. Chan Zuckerberg is one of our big investors. Their goal is to transform the space. Their goal is not to, in 3 years, try and drive a certain return. And that's the goal we share. And that's why we sought those kinds of investors.
Great. That's a really interesting question. I think we are out of time for more questions now, but thanks very much for introducing us, and it's been interesting. Thanks again.
Thanks for having me.